welcome to the mental health panel for students and early career professionals. We're very happy to have you all. And for people who don't know who I am, I'm Zemin Berre. I'm a chemistry graduate student at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. And I'm also part of the NSYCC Northeastern Section Younger Chemist Committee as the new chair-elect, and also part of the Graduate Student Senate as the new treasurer. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce our NSYCC secretary, Claudia Korschu, who's part of making this event possible. And she will be joining shortly, and she will be monitoring our chat for questions later. Now it's my honor to introduce our moderator for this panel, my friend and my colleague, Daniel J. Figueroa. He is Massachusetts attorney in training from Newark, New Jersey, with an expected graduation with his Juris Doctor degree this spring from UMass School of Law. He is simultaneously studying policy design and delivery through the executive education program at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. He has served as an advisor for various elected officials. Most recently, Danny fulfilled roles in the office of the mayor of the city of Newark, New Jersey, where he served on the senior staff of Honorable Ras J. Baraka and Honorable Senator Cory Booker. He has been stewarding one of the most progressive terms in graduate student governments, where he has created standing committees like the Graduate Mental Health Awareness Committee, which pools public and private resources for graduate students at the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth campus. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to you, Danny. So please, everyone join me in welcoming him as our moderator for this important mental health discussion. Danny?
Thank you. I think we first want to thank our host, right? The great engineering committee that is doing awesome things in New England throughout, that brought this panel together. Thank you, Zemin, for those kind words. They sound a lot nicer. I'm really not that important or that cool, but thank you. I appreciate it. So it makes me feel good, my 10 seconds of fame. But I will say who is cool, and that's the panelists that we have with us today. And I'm incredibly excited to be able to have this conversation with them. We have authorities really within mental health all across the nation that are joining us. I was asking them before we started where they all are, and it's good to know that everyone is in one part of the US. So if any of us want to travel, we have places to land. That always works, right? So we expect to know the recommendations of the local scenes. So I'm going to start with our panelists. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is Mr. Emmanuel Manny Garcia. So Manny Garcia is a doctoral student in clinical psychology from the City University of New York's CUNY, John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Manny's a proponent for improving access to physical and mental health education, assessment, and interventions for minority and underserved groups. He works in close partnerships with local communities of these traditionally disenfranchised communities to bring action towards a lot of their needs. His commitment to decolonize qualitative and quantitative methods in research and practice are reflective of his commitment as a Black, Indigenous, Latino, psychological scientist and practitioner, working on rewriting the narrative around mental health in Black communities and communities where systematic irregularities and socioeconomic barriers that allow our most vulnerable communities to fall through these proverbial cracks. So Manny is trilingual in English, American Sign Language, and Spanish. When he's not championing for more mental health access and transparency, Manny's a group fitness instructor, certified holistic yoga teacher, a writer, musician, and a proud father. So I want we all to come together and welcome Manny. Thank you, Manny, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and what a great introduction.
So I have the pleasure of introducing our next panelist, Dr. Broderick Sawyer. So Dr. Broderick Sawyer is a clinical psychologist specializing in race-based stress, trauma, mindfulness, and compassion from the University of Louisville. Frequently, Dr. Sawyer is sought for his counsel where he collaborates with universities, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and other stakeholders. His workshops, lectures, and consulting services are designed to help manage traumas, develop inclusive institutions and communities, decrease stress and increase emotional intelligence while learning mindfulness, meditation, and developing compassionate relationships. Additionally, Dr. Sawyer has clinical experience working with anxiety, depression, OCD, eating disorders, sexual gender identity development, and relational difficulties. Because of these specialties, he's frequently sought for lectures like ours today on culturally competent psychotherapy at national psychological conferences and other settings. Broderick has an enthusiastic interest in mindfulness and compassion-based meditation and has a personal meditation practice for nearly 2 years. He spends much of his free time practicing his own teachings, but really allowing himself to effectively and thoroughly understand these teachings and transitioning that to beginners and advanced practitioners alike. When he's not perfecting that craft, he's obviously an incredibly busy man. He works closely with community stakeholders in collaborating to spark grassroots changes. He's an avid reader, loves video games. I can join him in that group. And as a former basketball player, he's a sport proponent and really loves watching and playing the sport. So Dr. Broderick Sawyer, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for putting this together, y'all.
So I have the pleasure of introducing the next two incredibly amazing guests. Liesl Cross, who is a PhD student and doctoral fellow at Purdue University. Liesl is a skilled academic, alike as she is a teacher. She's known for her frequent posts and accolades, which have provided dividends in fellowships and awards, like one received by the Society of Applied Spectroscopies. I'm a lawyer now, people, so you gotta bear with me. At Purdue's School of Nuclear Engineering, or alike her selection, for Purdue's Master's Student Nominee for Midwestern Associations of Grad Schools Excellence in Teaching Award. She's a strong proponent for graduate student mental health and the improvement and expansion of mentoring. Her current research involves studying mental health in engineering graduate students, especially as it relates to empathy from their advisors. Speaking of expansion, Liesl serves as the social media coordinator for PhD Balance, a company working on expanding and creating community spaces for academics, graduate students internationally so that they can learn from their shared experiences. She also serves as a social media coordinator for the Association for Advancing Excellence in Engineering. She holds degrees from Villanova University and Purdue University, respectively. At Villanova, she graduated with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and holds a master's in biomedical engineering from Purdue University's Weldon School Biomedical Engineering. Welcome, Liesl. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And last, but most certainly not least, we've all heard that we save the best for last. I'm sorry to my other panelists. We have Dr. Brittany Ulorn. So I think I pronounced it right. There we go. So I'm still on track. I'm not ready to get kicked off yet as moderator. So Dr. Brittany graduated with her PhD in cancer biology from the University of Arizona this past May. Her dissertation work focused on the interplay between human papillomavirus and the innate immune system. Since then, she's transitioned into a science communication role for the Bio5 Institute at the University of Arizona. Brittany's also a yoga instructor and leads the PhD Balance Stronger Together campaign, a monthly peer support group for students to explore mental health and professionally develop related topics. Through all of her roles, Brittany aims to empower others with the tools to support their minds, bodies, and souls. Dr. Brittany, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
So throughout this conversation, I'll open up some questions to the panel, and we'll transition throughout to try to address some direct questions for some of our panelists here, and also incorporate some of the questions that we received from our attendees. and for those who will be joining us and watching the recording. So I also remind and encourage the viewers to please submit questions via the chat window. We will have members monitoring the chat. And before, unfortunately, our time of departure, we will make sure that we have enough time for a question and answer so that we can do what I'm interested in doing, is picking the brain of our incredible panelists. So without further ado, let's get down to the nitty gritty, the fun part. So my first question, and I think we'll start this with Dr. Lawrence, since we'll save the best for last, we'll start out with you. And this is a broad question. I think it's best in your terms. Obviously, we all have access to Google, but what is mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to me, mental health means someone's emotional and psychological well-being. So it can affect the way we think, the way we act, how we feel. Mental health is something that affects not only our relationship with ourselves, but our relationships with others and the way we move about the world. So I don't know, I think a lot of people, when they think of health and well-being, they really only think of physical health, or that's the first thing that they think of. But in my opinion, mental health is kind of our foundation, right? If you don't have a good relationship with your mind, and if it's not stable, then it's hard to be able to move throughout the world.
Thank you. So I'll pose that same question. We'll bring it to Dr. Sawyer.
Sure, I would say mental health. I don't know, I've gone through several iterations of what I think it means. But most recently, where I'm at, and really coming from a mindfulness background, mental health is how we relate to our inner experiences. And then from that place of relating to our inner experiences, we then perceive the world in a certain way. So if I have anxiety and I'm relating to it by suppressing it, then I'm going to be really anxious, when I experience more stress. But if I changed my relationship with my anxiety and I allow it, then I may just really be in line with what my biology does. So yeah, mental health in a lot of ways for me has an educational bent, almost like, you do push-ups and your pectoral muscles grow. So if you feel your feelings without trying to change them, then you become comfortable with them. So I guess that's kind of where my working definition is, but ask me again in 5 years, I'll say something different.
Sounds good. We'll make sure we won't wait that long to bring the panel back together. So hopefully the next year we'll see where you are. So I'm going to pose this question now to Liesl, and then we'll have Manny bring us back around. But Liesl, in your words, what is mental health?
Yeah, so I think Brittany and Broderick really kind of are hitting the nail on the head with their definitions on health. Mental health is something that is not stagnant. It's something that's always changing within you. And it's similar to physical health in that, like, you can be physically healthy up to the limits of your body. But this is internal. So it has to deal with your emotions. It has to deal with your cognitive abilities and just anything that is kind of more mind-based rather than physical-based.
So I've put Manny in a difficult position of having to bring this all home. So Manny, bring us all home. What is mental health?
Thanks for that, by the way. What everyone else said, I thought I would go with, so, there's a conceptual way to think about mental health, and then there's practical things that we can do. So I'm going to share a formula. I'm also like a stats nerd, so I use formulas a lot, but I share this with my clients often. So I wrote it here. So -1 to 0 plus 0 to 1. So -1 to 0 to me means, when people come to therapy, they're in a negative place often, right? So they're dealing with symptoms. Things are interfering with their joy, with their ability to be themselves, with their peace, with their unity of mind, body, and soul, with their ability to interact with others. All of those things, right? They may not even feel connected to themselves or to other people, right? So moving away from that, right? It's a practice, like we already mentioned. but that's not it. I think a lot of people think that's what mental health is, moving away from negative things. It's also moving towards positive things. So the 0 to 1. And I think that's the most important thing, right? Moving towards joy, moving towards realizing who you are, moving towards unity. I mean, it's a lifelong practice. Like I like that word, that it's a lifelong practice. So that's more of a practical take on it.
Thank you, all four of you, for that insightful understanding of what mental health is to you. So Manny, I'll allow you to start up the next question, pay it back a bit. So why this discussion about mental health, in particular within the intersectionality of students and early career professionals?
It's the foundation. It was said already. It's the most important thing. It's the most important thing. If you're gonna work, if you're gonna be a professional, if you're gonna learn, if you're gonna engage, we don't get into this work because we don't have ambition. We don't get into this work because we don't want to connect with other people or influence other people or grow as people. None of that is possible if we're not attending to our mental health. Right? It's the very foundation of who we are. I don't know if we're allowed to curse in this panel or not, but I was at another panel today, and there's a Bell Hooks quote that we were talking about. You know, if you're fucked up and you're leading the revolution, you're gonna have a fucked up revolution. That's paraphrasing, right? So, you know, we if we're gonna be leaders, if we're gonna be professionals, if we're gonna be helping other people and influencing other people, we should take care of ourselves first. It's really important, not only for our own quality of life, but because we impact other people and we're models to other people, whether we want to be leaders or not. Here we are, right? I think we do, but some of us are more shy.
Thank you, Lisa. So I will push this question to you. You know, you and Dr. Lauren have done great work with PhD Balance. So why this discussion? Why is it so important to have this discussion for mental health for students and early career professionals?
Yeah, this is part of why I also do the research that I do in empathy and advising. Graduate students have higher rates of mental illness than a lot of other populations. And that's even just on the broad level without even getting into, you know, the different groups within, you know, PhD and graduate students. And that's an issue. If, you know, we saw that graduate students were experiencing a physical illness, like polio, at a higher rate than the rest of the population, you know, I'm sure the CDC would come in here and say, why are all of these grad students being exposed to polio? So no one thus far has really been doing a lot to look at why graduate students are experiencing higher rates of depression and anxiety and other mental illnesses. And that's something that we need to explore more and make sure that we're not harming the people who are our next generation of innovation and the future of development in our world.
Thank you. So I'll switch up and I'll ask Dr. Lauren if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I really like what Lisa brought up about how grad students are the ones that are experiencing disproportionate amounts of mental health distress, especially anxiety and depression when compared to the general population. But I want to take it a step further and suggest that it's almost this culture that we've created among graduate students and young professionals that perpetuates mental health distress. I think and not just I think, like I know I've experienced the stress and expectations and especially the overwork that we place on ourselves to make a name for ourselves, and especially those with, you know, certain identities, like as a woman feeling the need to prove myself in STEM, people of color feeling the need to work extra hard to make their mark. It's just mental health distress is almost created in graduate school if someone doesn't come in with an underlying condition. And so I think it's just so important to talk about it, stop perpetuating this culture, and show that this is a big problem and we need to be changing the ways that we think about what success looks like, and start prioritizing ourselves. Because I think my favorite analogy is always, when you're on a plane, though I haven't been on a plane in a very long time, it's always, you have to put on your own mask before you can put someone else's on. And so it's like, if we can't take care of ourselves and put on our own mask, how are we going to expect ourselves to take care of everyone else and to do the best as we can as either graduate students or young professionals?
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Sawyer, bring us home.
Bring us home. I'm gonna try to like not preach, but then I wouldn't be being true to myself. So I guess I'll make 2 points. One is about power and oppression, and graduate students aren't unionized, nor can they unionize. So grad students are at the whim of their a lot of the times just really I would say tenure hungry professors and mentors who are pushing them to, write papers and, oh, you can get second author, get third author, this and that. So a lot of just the dynamic in graduate school, the way it's set up is that professors need tenure to be able to be safe and not get fired and not get laid off. So then that happens. And then graduate students are sort of in that mix, but it's the only way to get the degree. So graduate students are stuck in between this rock and this hard place where they have no agency, no advocacy. And for myself, that's how I felt. In the middle of grad school, I recognized that I had no agency and there weren't spaces to talk about mental health and to talk about this power dynamic where we're supposed to just accept, that this is the way it is. So just eat it. And then when you get the power, then just move on. But as a therapist, I know if you don't own your shit, it owns you. So if you're taking all of that, now you're insecure. Now you get a position of power. Now you're going to inflict power on other people because you haven't dealt with that stuff. So all of these feelings are bubbling under the surface. Like I remember for myself, and I had read, you read about mental health, you read about the treatments and all that stuff, but firsthand knowledge, firsthand experience with your own suffering, that's going to teach you everything you need to know about the research that you're trying to do, about the clients that you're sitting with, to be able to engage yourself in that way and own it as if it's normal. Like, yeah, I cry, yeah, I get scared. Yeah, I get angry. All of these things that we're pretending don't happen inside of us. If we would all just own it together, it would make it so that people like me in 2016 didn't have to begin to meditate because I realized like, oh crap, I have all of these issues. There's no space to really talk about it in my program. I'm going to have to engage myself and go outside of the system of grad school. Ironically, I'm in grad school to get a degree in mental health, but there's no option for me to get mental health, and if I tell someone like an advisor, like, oh yeah, I'm experiencing mental health issues. There was one advisor who would then encourage people to drop out. Say, oh, well, I guess you have mental health issues, so you should just go ahead and drop out. So again, I think Brittany hit the nail on the head. It's a culture thing. So building space is the first way to really get these things out in the open and start to talk about things exactly as they are, not pulling punches. So I guess that's why I hope that brings it home.
It most certainly does. And I think that sets up perfectly, if you haven't answered it, really for our next question. Before we get into that, I like your point. I think sometimes we do, and we can all relate, our institutions will preach about mental health, but not do enough to effectuate actual support for our students, right? So we don't need a whole bunch of people, smart people in a room. We have enough people in the room, right? We need to get them out there and get them on the ground. So I think that's a perfect setup for our next question. I'll leave this open to any one of the panelists that want to jump at it first. But what should mental health mean to us, both personally and as a community? How do we come together to bridge this and bring it all, to make it more holistic for us as early career professionals and grad students? And I know that's a bit of a variation. So, what what does, what does the mental health, what should it mean for us personally and us as a community?
As a
I think, oh, sorry, did we start talking at the same time?
Three of us did.
Okay, I'll just say one piece and then I'll let you guys go. So I think it needs to mean to us personally, it's a basic need we have to meet. Just like you would think of taking care of yourself when you're sick, and as we talked about earlier, like building muscle, it's important to treat mental health as a basic necessity, a basic way to take care of oneself. And as a community, it's something that we need to consider to support. And like we talked about, if that's changing the culture, if that's helping others find treatment, whatever that looks like, it needs to be something that not only an individual needs to think about, but something that a community needs to support the pursuit of.
So Lisa or Broderick, I know both of you guys were jumping at this, so we'll let Lisa go first if you want to take the lead.
Thank you. Yeah, so I see a lot of it as coming from a really community-focused perspective. And I think a big part of how we need to look at mental health as a community is with a lot of empathy. I think sometimes in academia, we come from the mental health place as like, oh, we just need to focus on self-care and like reminding our students that they need to take breaks, which is great, except that we don't often provide them the spaces to be able to make time for those things. There's like so many memes that always pop up when universities have their mental health weeks, and it's like, great, like you offered me a free yoga class that one time. I'm still stressed. And so from a community standpoint, we need to understand that like it's not something that you just think about during mental health week. It's not something where you just occasionally provide a self-care day. It's something that is a constant underlying presence in all of academia. And we treat people as people first, and we treat them as worker bees, never. They're always people first, not people that are just pumping out research.
Yeah, I agree to both of what you all said. And just to add to that, I think we have to start to see it as a generational issue. And when you look at it that way, then you have to then look who's in control, right? Who's in control of these policies, of this culture. And what you see is people who have been in academia for over 40 years, So they're not the ones, they're very far removed from the graduate student experiences, and they're decision makers. So then when you look at it that way, and then you try to advocate for yourself and your fellow graduate students or early career professionals, and those higher ups are not listening to you and they won't give you the infrastructure that you need because it's not their problem, which happens a lot, then I think it's community building on the part of the people whose problem it is. And I think that's a tricky one. That's tricky. And I work with Manny in this Black and Mental Health initiative. And what we did was nobody cares. Nobody gives a shit about what we need. So we're going to have to just get together and just knock this out ourselves. We know what we need. So why don't we create space and collaborate? And we all have these various talents and different things. You might have a grad student in your program who teaches yoga, another one who's a meditation teacher, all hang out and talk about those things, teach each other, share with each other, take care of each other, because sometimes the infrastructure, the power structures they don't care because it's not their problem. And I think that's hard for people to hear, especially when you have a mentor who helps you with a lot of different things, but you talk about this one thing and they invalidate you. So then you sort of invalidate yourself at that point. Then it's, oh, okay, I guess it's not important, right? Well, it's not their problem. So they can't exactly perspective take in that way. And the systems have been going, just like this for so long that folks can get detached in that. Because after you graduate, they're just going to get 5 more students and they've been doing that for years. So we have to take ownership and empower ourselves to take care of ourselves. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice to people. Sometimes you got to do it yourself, which is sad, but in a lot of cases true.
And I think this is, Manny, unless you have any additional comments, I think our panelists kind of hit everything up. Um, the next thing I wanted to bring up, so as we, and I, Broderick once again is beating me to the punch, but making it easy for me to set up these next questions. But we speak about these power dynamics. We speak about this complacency within our systems, within the comfort that exists within these different administrations. So we've touched upon this. These are some challenges, but what other challenges, or can we elaborate on the different challenges and factors that we should consider when discussing or addressing mental health resources and their availability? And I think I'll leave this one up in the open, unless I see Manny and Broderick kind of biting their lip. Maybe they're ready to take a bite at the apple. But for any of the panelists that want to take it, Manny, I'll defer to you first.
Saw me breathing deep there, yeah. Because you said availability of resources, and it's almost non-existent in the communities that I care about. The communities that we should all care about if we're in this work. But there is I guess, to quote James Baldwin, I'm looking at behavior, I'm not looking at what people say, right? So it's how you act, it's how people act that make me form these statements and these opinions. And like my dissertation is with New York City, young Black, Indigenous, and Latino men between the ages of like 16 and 30. Nobody cares about those men, right? They're abandoned. Right, they're referred to as like disconnected emerging adults, and I'm like, no, they didn't disconnect from anything. You didn't connect to them, right? You rejected them. So, us sitting in a room with a sound machine and white walls, reading out of a CPT manual, is completely worthless to those people. It does nothing for those people, right? So, what we need to be careful of is what we're claiming. That's the first thing we need to be careful of. What are we claiming? The claims don't match the evidence. Right? Evidence-based care, really? It doesn't match the evidence, right? Or is it working? Is it changing lives? Is it improving the quality of lives? That's what we need to be thinking about and talking about. So I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback a bit. I think we need to think about identity. Like, as a graduate student, this is where I saw myself, and I'm glad I caught it, because a lot of people don't catch it. People are saying, oh, just do this, or just do that, and just do this or do that, or come to trivia night with us, or this and that. And then I would go to all these things, and then I would be like, I'm the only Black dude in this motherfucker. What is this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, I feel like I'm code switched all day. And then I'm trying to go to a place where I can relax. And then I start to realize, yo, Brod, you got to talk to more Black people in your free time, man. You got to like talk to people who understand and validate your experience. And you have to own that and be okay with that. And if people get upset with you for not coming to this or that, it is what it is. You know, and I started to need to boundary set in that way. And listening to Nas Illmatic was deeply healing to me after a long day, rather than hanging out with coworkers, like that. So I think identity, we got to understand that not all grad students are the same, and they have different experiences of oppression and different identities that need to be seen and valued. And we got to make that space for ourselves a lot of the time. At least for me, I think what is it, Black men who get degrees in clinical psychology, it's like less than 1%. And Black people as a whole, I think it's less than 5%. So I really had to focus on that. That was a big one for me, and still is in a lot of ways.
Thank you. And I'll open that up to Brittany or Lisa, if you guys have any comments.
Yeah, I was just gonna add another idea that I had in terms of barriers to access to care. I love what Broderick and Manny talked about in terms of kind of that cultural or that identity perspective. I think it's also important to know the time and the money and the resources that one needs to access care, especially if you're talking about that traditional professional, right? Like a therapist or a doctor or a counselor, psychiatrist. It can be expensive, and especially as graduate students, it can be very hard to find the resources to be able to afford treatment, find the time, especially like we talked about, we have this culture of overwork. So how am I going to tell my boss I need to take time out of my day to go see a therapist? Like it's just, it makes it even more difficult. And then on top of that, I know it's a little easier now because a lot of these sessions can be done virtually. We've hopefully opened up a lasting connection to see therapists or other professionals virtually. But if you're going to see someone in person, finding the means to get that transportation to get there. So it's just so difficult to even literally see someone, that I think we need to help reduce those barriers.
Great. Lisa, do you have any other comments? I know that they did a great job at summarizing all that, so I won't put you on the hot seat too much. It's kind of hard to follow.
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that they all said, but I also want to add with Brittany's piece real quick is just even when your university or your institution tries to provide the accessibility, my university provides free counseling and psychology services, they're tapped out. It can take you up to a year to get into an appointment. And even in that case, there's only one person in our CAPS department that is trained to work with LGBTQ plus people. And that one person is way, way overworked and overburdened right now with the number of undergraduates and graduates I have to see regarding specifically queer matters.
It's incredible. I think this is something that we all relate in our institutions. What you guys are going through is on another level. For a year wait is incredible. I mean, people don't have a year in sometimes, right? But I think this is a great opportunity to segue to the next question. So what can we do to support students and early career professionals who want to bring attention to their campuses or to their spaces? And what I'll do is I'll allow Lisa, if you want to take the lead on this one, and we can circle back around.
Sure thing. So I think one thing is you have to kind of be that advocate for yourself in terms of being able to know, like, I need this, and really fighting the people in power to say, like, all right, there are not enough people in CAPS, I can't get in, and you need to help me find the resources to do that. I think another thing is Broderick earlier was talking about the power dynamic that the faculty and advisors have in terms of kind of controlling a lot of the resources and access to those resources. And I think that we need to flip that on its head in some ways. So use that power dynamic as a power dynamic for good. So how much more mental health training can we get to the faculty and advisors? And I'm not talking about making them our therapists. I think that's a bad idea. But I'm talking about them being able to recognize in meetings, like, this student is struggling. Instead of waiting for them to ask for the resources, I'm going to give them the resources and provide them the support structure that they need to go to those resources. Because sometimes, when we're in our lowest points, it's difficult to advocate for ourselves and to ask those questions. And so kind of using that support and power dynamic to better the situation rather than to degrade it is my thoughts on that.
No, that's great. I think it's important for us to continue to push for a system that's forthcoming, right, as transparent as possible, so people are not left in limbo. Brittany, if I may, what are your thoughts? What can we do to support students and early career professionals who want to bring attention to their campuses or spaces?
Mute. It's a problem. That's a great question. So in terms of what can we do for students who want to bring attention or resources to their campus, I think it's It's about reaching out. I think it's empowering students with knowledge and resources. And so I know we've talked a lot about how, at one's university, there might be these existing resources, but there might not be enough. So I think it's about banding together. And I think that's one reason I love PhD Balance is we talk very candidly about how big of an issue mental health is among graduate students and young professionals. And so even for those students who are unable to seek professional treatment or who are on a waiting list, it's just providing that community support. And going back to, again, what Lisa was saying about empathy, just saying, like, I see you, I hear what you are going through, and it sounds tough. But I will be here to listen and support you in whatever way you need. Just to be able to be compassionate towards others, I think, is important so that those students can then bring that back to their universities and maybe create student groups, student support groups that can just meet and have these candid in-person or on Zoom conversations. Yeah, I think it's just giving people help and giving them empowerment to have these conversations candidly to support each other and help them find the resources that they need either at their university or community.
I think that's great. And I think before I ask either Manny or Broderick to share their thoughts on it, I think it's important you bring up the point of reaching out. I think as grads, we have to de facto take on a role as professional networkers, whether we like it or not. Even if we are introverts, right? And I think that's kind of what led to this great panel. Credit to Zemin for her Twitter presence and following, PhD Balance and both Black and Mental Health to bring our panelists here. So thank you for those thoughts. I'll ask the same question, Manny or Broderick. What are your thoughts? What can we do to support students or early career professionals who want to bring attention to their campuses or spaces?
I'll go. You see me chomping at the bit, man. So I guess I'll give, because I agree with what all the other panelists have said so far. So I'll kind of give the perspective of my more political activist sort of lens. Being in Louisville, I learned a lot from these folks. In another life, I think I was a lawyer, but I ain't going to law school now. What's that?
It's never too late.
Oh man, give me 5 years. I'll think about it. So when we think about power, there's infrastructure. So there's the APA accreditation board. They go in to universities and they check boxes and say, is this program good enough? So what needs to happen in my mind to make that widespread change is that students, early career professionals later in their career, they all need to organize and they need to force the APA to provide some sort of recommendation, bylaw, something. Because if a problem exists and everyone knows it exists, but they're not doing anything, then I'll defer back to Manny, what he said with James Baldwin. How can I trust what you say when I'm watching what you're doing? So what that means is you have to organize and you have to put pressure on organizations to change their stuff. Because like I said, a lot of these, these older professors who are just set in their ways, they're not going to do extra work because they don't feel like it. They're too far removed from the experience. They don't have that day-to-day empathy, of being a grad student at an R1 university or something like that. So I would say organize. You got to organize. You got to know who's pushing the buttons, and you got to put pressure, a lot of pressure, to get really what you want, and not be afraid to make those demands, and have a united front about that.
Yes, I agree, and I add that. And then we do it ourselves, right? That's what Broderick was talking about with Black and mental health. We while we're changing power structures that are entrenched in people's minds and in institutions that ultimately may not change, may just have to go away in many instances. What are we going to replace them with, right? It's one thing to talk about what's deficient in an institution or a program. It's another thing to say, well, then what's your alternative, right? that was a rebuttal to some activists that I witnessed, and they didn't have an answer, and it was a crushing blow. So it stuck in my mind that what does it take to really provide for people? You know, while you're changing institutions, for example, while you're changing structural things, I love the idea of I see you. What I've added to that is I believe you. Right? It's really important to tell people I believe you. You don't have to defend yourself to me. You don't have to explain yourself. I'm with you. Okay, what do we do? Let's brainstorm. Let's get online. Let's meet each other, right? Black and Mental Health is a bunch of people that never met in person except Broderick and I. There are people someone from London's on our team, and we are pulling off this week, and we didn't know how it would go, and it's amazing. And feel very close, love for each other, and met people from all over the world. And now, because we did that, because we were approachable, because we were vulnerable, because we put ourselves out there, because we took a risk, now we're in a position to say, hey, institutions, look at us. Now you're speaking to the world. You're not just speaking to Manny or Broderick or Liesl or Brittany or Daniel or any of us, right? You're speaking to all of these people, and we demand change. That's a much more powerful way to make change. So I think combining everybody's answers, I think that's what I just did. So thanks to everybody.
No, that's great. I'm always gonna say there's powers in numbers, right? So it's important for us to be collective and have that that unified front. So we've discussed and touched upon this, you know, some of the negative connotations and misconceptions around mental health. So how do we change these misconceptions around mental health? Kind of just feeding off of a lot of what we've already spoken about, and rid these negative connotations so that mental health doesn't equate to issues like violence or equate to issues like weakness. And I leave the floor open to any of the panelists.
Yeah, I think at least for myself, and I think context is important. So I'm a very masculine presenting, and I'm 6'4", light-skinned Black dude. You know, so just with that context in mind, my approach has been very much interpersonal. So in one-on-one settings or when I'm talking or whatever, I just own all of my stuff as much as I possibly can. Like, you know, and just being very cavalier about it. Yeah, I have a trauma background. You know what I mean? Yeah, I've had substance abuse issues. Yeah, when I first started to meditate, I cried my eyes out almost every single time. You know, just owning it. Like, I'm a human. Like, humans do that. If you have tear ducts, then you're a human and you cry. Like, don't lie. Like, it is what it is. You know, but we have to become comfortable with our own internal experiences before we can then speak to those experiences in other people, because also there's risk in that. So you're sort of balancing, at least for me interpersonally, I'm balancing this, how real can I be right now and also keep myself safe. And I also think that my identity, being a very masculine guy, I think especially in circles, I might be able to say more than say maybe a Black woman, you know, or someone who's queer and expressing those things. You know what I'm saying? So I think identity is important, but for me, it's about normalizing through me being vulnerable and making it a point to be vulnerable. Because if I don't model, how am I going to change any situation that I'm in? So I'm sort of looking at each situation like it's an opportunity to own my stuff, and hopefully someone can be like, you know what, I can own my stuff like 5% more after watching Broderick do it.
I want to echo what Broderick said. I think it is a lot about those of us who have been through things or who are going through things that are in a place to share, to be vulnerable and show their strength and share those things. Because like you said it, I know when I was going through, I personally had an eating disorder as a coping mechanism to deal with extreme anxiety and stress and perfectionism. I felt so alone. And I think that perpetuates this stigma that we have around mental health, right? It's, as a 22-year-old at the time who was going through this, I thought that I was the only one. And I know I wasn't, but just because nobody was really talking about it and sharing their story made me feel like I was the only one and made me feel like I was a problem for going through these things. And so now I love being able to very candidly tell people what I'm going through. And I'm very happy to talk about it because I think it shows that you can come out on the other side, and it shows, yes, the journey is tough, but here's what, you know, I have learned, and here's what so much joy, like, that this experience, this mental health battle has brought to my life. I think that's important to show that, yes, there are dark times, and yes, there's never an ideal time to be going through mental health distress or trauma. But there can be gems that can make you come out on the other side a better, stronger, more resilient person. So I think it's beautiful that those of us can share those stories to help empower others to do the same, or just to encourage them to continue on in their own journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with sharing your story if you're in a place that you can do so. I personally go for like kind of the humor angle with a lot of it. Most of you have commented on my fire background of the it's everything's fine dog. And that's kind of like how I help to destigmatize it, like on an individual level. I listened to the podcast My Favorite Murder, which those two women are super open about their mental health. And they've posted like artwork that other people have done of like, if you can't make your own neurotransmitters, like store-bought is fine, with pictures of your medications that you're on. And I think that kind of stuff just really helps, because humor helps us cope with these things, and it's always so much nicer to laugh about these kind of situations than it is to like cry over them. It makes it more comfortable in a way, and if you can show your vulnerability through humor, I think that helps a lot. And then on like a community level, I think it's just changing our language and not shying away from those difficult conversations. So, you know, in lab meetings, if, you know, you do a round robin of how is everyone doing, you know, what somebody says that they're not doing great, don't say, oh, I'm sorry, I hope it gets better, and move on to the next person. Take a moment, sit with it, sit with that discomfort, and then move on from there.
I was just in a discussion before this with a mental health advocate who's a yoga teacher, and I was impressed that he was out protesting last week, and I saw him on his social media, and I was like, wow, I've never seen him do that. And he got arrested, all this stuff. So then the Breonna Taylor announcement came out, and we're all upset again. And he actually said, you know, in the interview, I couldn't do it. I couldn't go out. I was too hurt. Right. So I think a balance also between, I love being transparent. I'm open about my mental health. And also, you know, we can also model when we're not ready to do something, when we're not ready to reveal something, when we're afraid to reveal something. I revealed today on, for its Black and Mental Health stories today, that I checked myself into the hospital suicidal many years ago, right? And that visit saved my life. That visit changed me. I wasn't ready to talk about that before. You know, I was too afraid, right? And so, and I'm dealing with the anxiety around, you know, what is that going to mean, and how is that going to end up? So that's where I am. I'm transparent about it. I don't like the idea of creating pressure for everyone to have to be the same in what they reveal. You don't have to reveal anything about yourself. If you want to, that's fine. It can also be incremental, right? And so I incrementally reveal things, see how comfortable I feel, give myself room to breathe and grow. So modeling that also, I think, is really useful for other people.
Thank you all for your perspectives on that. So I'll say I come from an urban area in Newark, not too far from where Manny is, over the bridge in New York. And for my culture, I didn't understand what mental health was probably until I was a graduate student, much older, just because in my community, there's no such thing as mental health, right? Whether you are a Black man or just even a woman, right? In our cultures, the woman holds a certain position in, you know, in the dichotomy of the family, which is, it's just can't be described in words. So I understand. I thank you guys for sharing your perspectives. And this next question you know, is something which I asked upon you and I shared myself. So throughout my last couple years, I've realized what mental health looks like, right? When I was more exhausted than ever, I would find myself taking naps or sleeping for prolonged hours and sleeping through things and saying, you know what, it's okay, and pushing it off, or even just being edgy with my family, right? With my close friends, the ones that are closest to me, taking out on them, and realizing, understanding, wow, this is a palpable issue. You know, in law school, they love to preach about how lawyers have the highest substance abuse issues, how we have the highest issue, depression, but they don't do enough to give us resources, right? So as I started to learn this is a palpable issue, I started to meet more of my colleagues in engineering, more of the colleagues in sciences who didn't even have the interactions that we are able and privileged as lawyers to have. Those same students that are in labs that are not interacting every day with people and have to still fight these demons. So when you were starting your career, or whether you as a student, when did you realize that this was a palpable issue? When did you realize that mental health is a serious concern for students and early career professionals? It doesn't have to be a specific example, although we obviously welcome that. But I do think it's important that we share this, because there are, you know, the biggest thing about this is demystifying the ability, like what a lot of our panelists have said, is this ability to translate, right, to convey how we feel in our messages. So as panelists, when did you guys realize that this is a palpable issue? I'm not the only graduate students. This is something that's happening across the nation that needs some reform around.
For me, when I realized it was a bigger issue than just something that was happening within myself was honestly when my therapist told me. Like I mentioned in the question before, I thought, you know, there's no reason a 22-year-old should be going through the things that I was going through. People my age, you just don't have mental health distress or mental illness. But until my therapist opened my eyes and was like, actually, this is so common. You would have no idea how many people your age, even young women like you that come in that are high achievers who have these problems. Like, you're not alone. She's like, I'm sorry to say, but you're not special. And unfortunately, this is a really big issue. And then as a scientist, that's when I get into finally looking into the research and seeing all of these studies that have been done to show how, you know, graduate students experience depression and anxiety at such high and alarming rates. It's sad that it took so long to realize. So I guess a simple answer to that question of when did I realize? I realized too late. And so I think that's why discussions like this are important, because we need to be sharing that this is an issue and educating students before they find themselves in therapy.
Yeah, and for myself, I would say I first realized. Remember, 2016 was a wild year for me. Not because of the obvious reason, but it was when I first read, you know, in full detail, autobiography of Malcolm X. Then I'm reading it, and I was like, oh shit, like I have a lot of these problems. And a lot of people that I know have these same problems. Then I began to meditate. And as I started to meditate, I developed this ability to check in with myself, with my feelings, beyond thoughts, beyond words, beyond what I said, beyond all the masks, all of that. I could then tune in and then be like, oh, I kind of feel like crap today. Or I feel really afraid today. Or I would just sit and observe, and whatever came up, came up. And then I just noticed the frequency with which this happened. Then I started to, you know, check in with the timing. So then when I would walk into the graduate student clinic and I would notice that I would feel really anxious, or I would be in community with a bunch of other grad students, then I was feeling almost their anxiety. So as I started to check in with myself, I could identify when I was anxious. Then I could identify when everyone else was anxious, when everyone else was really upset. And I started to notice that, wow, my fellow grad students are under a lot of stress, just like me. And then in going to conferences and different things, just little comments, you know, like, you know, talking to a fellow grad student presenting a poster, like, yeah, well, you know, I made this poster and my advisor only looked at it for 2 seconds and didn't give me feedback. you know, and just the jokes about things like that, the invalidation, someone really cares about something, or just, yeah, you know, I'm along at this conference, can't really afford my hotel room, but if I don't show up, then I get in trouble with my mentor, ha ha ha, you know, and I could then not just see it, but I could feel it. And I started to just feel a level of compassion for both myself and fellow grad students who were going through this. So, so I think that's when it started, when I could check in, feel my own feelings, then I could start to see that everyone else was pretty much feeling the exact same thing without any agency to change it.
Yeah, I recognized that this was an issue. So when I went into the Weldon School of Biomedical Engineering, I thought that I was going to be a doctoral student. And I ended up mastering out. I put that in quotes because I'm trying to get away from using that term for it. But I had an advisor who initially, like, they would say really encouraging things about how they knew that graduate school was really difficult mentally and emotionally for students. And they even were the ones that introduced me to a comic called PhD Comics, Piled Higher and Deeper, which, you know, I think a lot of people know about it and kind of really resonate with a lot of what is going on in those comics. Then I realized that, like, they recognized those things in PhD comics, but they didn't actually experience them or recognize that they were happening to me, even when I was open and honest with my feelings about what was happening. It was kind of billed as me being hormonal or having issues with myself. And so at least that's how it felt to me. And so from there, it's a matter of, you know, I was like, well, so people joke about it and they recognize it, but no one's actually doing anything about this. And so that's when I really started to think about, like, what could be changed. And that's when I switched into my new program and wanted to research and really prove that it's more than a joke and it's more than the comics. You know, those are a good place to start, but that can't be where it ends.
Yeah, I'll describe it as I found out from the doctors. So there was two kinds of doctors. My medical doctors. I went to a gastroenterologist because I got so sick at one point. I couldn't hold water down for 6 months. Not 6 months. Sorry, I would be dead. 6 weeks though. I lost 30 pounds in 6 weeks. That's how much acid reflux GERD that I had. So just by chance, my gastroenterologist was a Black man. You know, he saw me in the waiting room and reacted to me and was like, you know, he looked at my insides, you know, he put me down for that because I was freaking out. I came to and he was standing there and he said, what grad school are you in? That was his question, right? My dentist said the same thing and my eye doctor said the same thing, right? So those are the medical doctors. So then I'm in a clinical psychology PhD program now, but I was in a different one. I had to leave that other program due to a lot of things, racism being number one. But one of the big first signs that there was a problem is that I'm in clinical psychology with the leaders of mental health, self-appointed, right? Who are writing all these articles and saying, you know, this is how we're supposed to live. And here's, you know, I'm a healer of this and that. And so I tell them what my medical doctors say, and I'll never forget the quote from one of the faculty. Well, this is as good as it gets. Right, so I knew we had a problem. Right, Houston, we have a problem because if this is as good as it gets, we're doomed. You know, so and I'm a very outspoken person. You want to fight, I'll fight you. I don't want, you know, like I don't like to fight, but if you're gonna fight me, I'm not gonna walk away from it. Right? A lot of people are not like that, and they're too vulnerable. Right? They're a lot younger than me. I'm a lot older than most students, so. You know, I've taken some hits and I know I can survive. So when the so-called leaders are so dismissive and so happy to accept that we are literally dying, right? Then we have a real problem.
Thank you. This has been a great conversation. I'm gonna lead into two more questions just because I see that we're running out of time. We're getting close to, and I want to get to some of the questions submitted by some students and early career professionals and open up to some that are here with us today. This question is for Brittany and Liesl. So what are your thoughts for women in STEM who may have the concern of seeking help or resources and outlets?
Brittany, do you want to handle this or do you want me to go first?
Start.
Okay. So this is something that I get asked a lot because I started STEM and engineering programs in high school, actually. And so I think that it can be more difficult because women are sometimes looked at for their mental health issues as just being like, oh, it's just that time of the month, or like, oh, it's just a hormonal thing, or women are just more emotional in general. And what I will say is like, don't let that get in the way of you seeking help. Don't let that get in the way of you talking to your gynecologist if it is something that is related to a cyclical thing. You know, it can be difficult to find balance when you have outside people telling you that it's just part of being a woman. And you know, it's not just part of being a woman. You deserve health in physical senses and in mental senses, and you deserve to feel like you are balanced. Do not be afraid to seek help, and do not be afraid to be open about needing help.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Liesl said in that being emotional is not the trait of a biological female. You know, we all have the ability to express our emotions. And so I am a very emotionally expressive person. I'm a very easy crier. I can be very happy and I can be very sad. But I don't see that as a weakness, and I don't see that as a deterrent to my either personal or professional goals. I think bringing emotion and that side to something, that passion, can be such a benefit. And so, you know, I know that growing up, my role model for someone in STEM was Bill Nye. A, he was a really cool guy, but B, at the time, it was just white guys, right? I didn't really have anyone to look up to. So I'd say find someone you identify with, whether you're a woman, a person of color, LGBTQ community, find someone that you identify with and look up to them and see how they leverage their entire personality and their entire being as a positive in pursuing STEM or pursuing whatever it is that they want to pursue.
I have such a girl crush on Dr. Jen Golbeck and Dr. Susanna Harris, like in terms of just how they approach both being bi and being a woman in science and mental health. They're amazing.
Thank you, Lisa and Brittany. I appreciate that. So I will like to make the point that I am an emotional person while I do walk around with a scowl on my face pretty much all day. So I'd like to blame it on me being a Cancer, but Brittany, don't worry. I most certainly am all about expressing myself. I do think it humanizes a lot of these conversations and really allows us to open up, aside from me being a Cancer, which I'm still gonna just throw that in there. So I'm gonna just turn back to Broderick and Manny, and I'm gonna pose the same question for you guys. However, I'm gonna ask, what are your thoughts for Black students and early career professionals who may have the concern of seeking help or resources and outlets?
I'll start since Broderick started last time. It's a valid concern. It's a very valid concern. It was used against me. Me talking about my mental health was used against me. And they're gonna use anything that they want against me because I'm Black anyway, right? So my attitude now, I mean, it was very hurtful. I had to change advisors. The first advisor I had used, I'll never forget what he said. You know, you're not like us. You know, he managed to like insult my mental health and be racist at the same time. It was magical, actually. You know, you're like someone who went to war and like had their leg blown off. I know you have PTSD, so you'll relate to this, you know, and they can walk, but they can't walk like us, right? So I'm like, okay, well, that made this easy, you know, fuck you. Like, I'm out of here, right? I'm going somewhere else, right? And so, but it taught me that he wasn't a leader. It taught me that he was wrong. And I would rather be betrayed by them than to betray myself, right? We need to take care of ourselves, right? Be strategic about it. Know who to trust, know who to tell. Like I said before, make it incremental. You know, don't just go outing yourself to everyone. There are people that can be trusted, right? And it may not be the people in your immediate grad program or circle. You can find people online. You can find people on your campus who are more supportive into mental health. So yeah, valid concern, and you still need to take care of yourself because no one else is going to do it for you.
Yeah, and I think my response, I guess take it with a grain, because I'm not a woman, but I really do buy into feminist theory across all levels, all layers of oppression. And I'll quote Audre Lorde, what she say: "You can't use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house." And for me, myself, as a Black man in a PhD program with white ideology, and even some of my mentors and professors I followed after, they were still indoctrinated into this system of whiteness, you know, of white supremacy. So I had to start to see myself as the person who validates myself. And I think Lisa made a point here. What I kind of heard her saying was, yo, women, don't get gaslit. Don't get gaslit thinking that, you know, this and that, because if you buy into what patriarchy says about women, then you're going to suppress all of your stuff and you're going to roll away at your mental health. It's the same thing for Black folk. You know, if I listen to, my white microaggressive supervisor about, oh, me being sensitive, or, oh, when I said you were articulate, I was just paying you a compliment and this and that. And then I give him a break and say, oh, well, he's well-meaning, da-da-da-da. Now what I'm doing is I'm allowing him in. I'm allowing emotional attunement with someone who's hurting me. Whether or not he knows he's hurting me is irrelevant. I need to keep myself boundaried, myself safe. I need to stop seeing myself as an extension of America. And I think that's the Black experience specifically. Just to quote Malcolm X, he goes, "I'm not a Democrat, not a Republican, and I'm not even American, and I'm smart enough to know it." You know, it's not to say that you can't be successful in the United States, but you are a descendant of people who were kidnapped here. And if you identify too much with American culture, you're identifying with something that was designed to hurt you, a la critical race theory. You know, it's baked in there. So once I realized that, I started to put on the code switching mask, but I wouldn't identify with it. I knew it was a mask. If you get confused, you're going to be real uncomfortable. So when I come home and I take that mask off, I'm listening to my Nas, I'm talking to Black friends, I'm feeling my feelings, right? And no one can tell me how I feel. I had to learn to self-validate and see through gaslighting and not get gaslit with how I was feeling. And that ability just to check in, meditation was just, oh man, meditation and self-compassion were just so huge. Like, not in I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes a day. I'm engaging in it all day long. It just became a philosophy, a lifestyle, which helped me really take care of myself and draw those, you know, psychological identity-based boundaries, you know.
Is it okay if I say one more thing really quick?
Yeah, sure.
Because everybody got me so excited with what they said. Also, you know, like, my heart is with everyone because I know what it feels like to be attacked on this. The Audre Lorde quote, because I've been thinking about this a lot: "We can also not use the master's tools to build our houses." I'm less interested in dismantling the master's house. I have zero interest in using those tools to build my house. And so I'm going to come at it open. I'm going to come at it authentic. I'm going to come at it transparent and let those people do what they do.
So snaps all around. This is great conversation. I'm going to open up and ask you guys two questions that were submitted from our audience. We've touched on some of these, but I think it's important we come back and we can kind of, just hit it one more time. So I'll open this up to the panel. Please feel free to just jump in. How should one approach unhealthy relationships with your coworkers or colleagues if you're experiencing something like this nature, especially if they're your superiors? So the question again is, how should one approach unhealthy relationships with coworkers, colleagues who might be experiencing this this issue with their superiors?
My first go-to is always try to leave that situation if you can. But I know that that's not something that you can always do, especially when it comes to an advisor in a department and like this is your only chance, or it's, year 5 and you just want to get out and graduate. So at that point, what I would say is try to keep it really strictly professional, and that's just a way of protecting yourself. So, if that's writing out a kind of like work contract of, these are the things that I'm going to do for the lab. This is what I'm going to write. These are when you can expect to hear my progress reports. And other than that, like, we're not going to talk. I think that's a great way to approach it. And it keeps it, very professional, and it protects you from having to deal with the nonsense. And then that way, if you do need to escalate things and take it to the ombudsman or anyone else, you have a written contract of when you are going to have things done and when you are going to check in. And they can't fight you on that. You have this in writing. So get out if you can. If not, just build the professionality barrier and seek help elsewhere for the other things in your life.
I love that.
Go ahead, Roderick.
I'll be quick. So yeah, I love that, and I'll add, create a paper trail. If you know they're crossing those boundaries, if you signed a contract and they're like, oh, do X, Y, and Z, write an email that implicates them. Just thinking about later. So, okay, so I told you that I would only be available during these times, and you want me to go outside of those times to complete X, Y, and Z. And then if you don't have the power to get out, sometimes you're gonna have to do that. But at the very least, you express, and they said, "Yep, okay." And it is what it is for that time, but that you're creating this paper trail. And if you do that every single time, just confirming, okay, so please confirm for me that you want me to do this thing that I told you that, isn't within blah, 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 blah. And I watched really my father go through this with a racist fire department for years. And this is all he did, is he just created that paper trail, create it. And then when he gets the chance, when he actually has power, then he just wielded all of that power. But he documented and all of that. And reach out, like reach out to other professionals in your field. Like you don't know who has power and who doesn't. But you go to conferences and you're talking with a professor or something like that. If you feel comfortable, ask that person, like, hey, how would you deal with a situation like this? Without outing yourself and becoming unsafe. There are ways to go about that and get that support and get that advice. It's just that there's no infrastructure for talking about these things. So nothing moves unless we make things happen. And one last thing I'll add. So when grad students talk to me, I graduated like about a year ago. So I have a lot of people who I'm connected to in graduate schools who come to me and say, hey, what would you do about this? And I could say, well, actually, I could connect you with this doctor who I know is down, is not going to like take advantage of you or shit talk you or anything like that. Here, talk to them. So now you're sort of using your networks and people who are now doctors, who now have power, to help you out. So you want to also coordinate that circle, coordinate that power.
I think that's great. I was also gonna mention, if it's if it's something or a relationship that you can't get out of, or maybe something that you want to talk about, or a relationship you might want to save, maybe it was a misunderstanding, have someone help you mediate a conversation. This past year was my 5th and final year of graduate school, and my PI, ironically, who knew the mental health distress that I was experiencing, knew I was going to therapy, he overstepped some boundaries that I had very clearly set in paper with a paper trail, and he just wasn't budging. And it was during a very stressful time at the onset of the pandemic. I was trying to write my dissertation, defend, and it's a relationship that I thought was worth saving, and I thought something worth talking about, but I wasn't comfortable talking about it with just him. I didn't feel he could be objective at the time. And so I brought in an outside mediator, and we had a very honest, open conversation, and it helped mend our relationship right at the end of my graduate school career. And so I'm very grateful for that. So I'd say if it's an experience or a relationship that you would consider maybe staying in if things could get better, I'd suggest, and you're not comfortable talking to that person one-on-one, I'd suggest seeking out someone who can be that objective mediator.
Yeah, so I agree with what everyone said, and I think there's a spectrum of, like you said, unhealthy relationships. So, you know, what does that mean exactly? There's a spectrum, right? There obviously, or not obviously, that's not the right way to say it, but possibly you want to try to solve the situation. There's a lot at stake. We put a lot into working with people, and leaving an advisor means leaving work and being punished and ostracized and all that. I've been through all of it. Assuming none of that works, then you have to really think about, remind yourself what you're doing. Why are you here? Why are you in grad school? Why are you pursuing this? What do you want? Right? And I'm an extreme case because I was ABD 6 months into clinical internship, and I quit my entire PhD program and then proceeded to look for a new one, finally got into a new one, but I'm 3 years behind now. I lost all of that status and that work. So it's been extremely painful. I'm still dealing, I've actually haven't had a place to live for 5 months, partially as a result of this. I'm getting into a place October 1st, but you know, so this is why I don't say it lightly. I don't say, you know, do what I do. I'm an extreme case because I'm extremely stubborn and determined to not spend any more time in unhealthy relationships with unhealthy people. I have an amazing advisor now. He's wonderful. I'm in an amazing lab. I love the people where I am. They're very supportive. And I have to say that what Broderick said, he's not just talking ideas. During this time where I was suffering and I needed work, it was Broderick who said, hey, remember this friend we had in grad school? She opened the clinic. You know, and I'm getting emotional now because this really changed my situation. And she hired me, you know, and so now I have a job and I can make money and get into it. She helped me get into a place, you know, so this is real. This is real. I took the step that I needed to take that I thought was important because I couldn't deal, the entire program was unhealthy at a certain point, right? So, but everyone has to decide what, right? I think there's a good range in responses here, you know, from having someone mediate a conversation, clearing it up, to nothing is worth sacrificing your mental health over, ever.
Thank you. So we'll conclude on this last question. I'll ask you guys in a very quick 30 to 45 second summary. Very hard, I know. How do we keep motivation up? This was a panelist question. How do they keep motivation going?
Find people that celebrate you, find people that believe in you, and then do what you love with them every single day, even if it's for 5 minutes, right? This is why I love Black and Mental Health. Although I haven't met them, these people in the committee, and Zori's here in the meeting, and it was Zori's tweet that we saw, and so yeah, let's do this thing, and now it's a thing, right? And so we're so happy. We're heartbroken this week, and yet we're so happy to be together, and now we have extra support. So when the Breonna Taylor announcement came out, we were all there to support each other and crying together, you know, and asking each other advice. And so, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I'll pick the panelists. So, Brittany, your thoughts. How do we keep motivation up?
For me, it's about trying to find something beautiful or something positive in what can often be a really shitty situation. I spent many years getting dogged down by the negative and how mad I was or how upset or how shameful things were. But I think just being able to put a positive spin on a shitty situation, no matter how bad, keeps me going and keeps me motivated.
Lisol or Roderick, do you guys have any final thoughts on?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, find something that gets you out of bed in the morning. It doesn't have to be related to your work. If it's taking your dog for a walk or a really nice cup of coffee, just get out for that.
And I would say, know your why. Know your why, and let it come from a deep place. Like, you know what I mean? Like just let it come from that. Like watching my dad get shit on by white people for years. That's why. So when some supervisor tells me this or that, I'm like, you're not my concern. You know, my success is inevitable. I'm a black man. I've gotten this far. I ain't going back there. So you better come and take it from me. And that's the kind of attitude that I have, but it all goes back to my why, which is more powerful than the day-to-day mishaps and all that stuff. So be able to refer back to that in every moment. It keeps you going. It just generates a sense of desperation, as my basketball coach used to say, a sense of urgency, like getting it done, zero sum kind of attitude, which just personally helps me. And also find your style. You know, my style is very go, rah, rah, get it. Maybe that's not your style, but figure that out and commit to it.
And I'm sorry we've gone over a minute or two, but I want to ask you guys in a 10-second little quick blurb, how to give us an update of what you're doing. How do we follow what you guys are up to? How do we get in contact with you?
I'll put my Twitter and Instagram handle in the chat. And I post a lot there. So my research has shifted because of COVID from a biological perspective to a social media one. So yeah.
And thank you all for dropping your information in the chat. This will be posted, so we hope that those that are here in attendance now and those that will be watching the recording in the future will reach out to you guys. But with that, I want to thank our incredible panel for what a moving conversation that we had this afternoon. I think it was, I mean, I'm speechless. I want to do it again. Obviously, I already told you guys I love to speak, so I will never take an opportunity to say no around that. But I want to give a special thanks really to our number one host here, which is obviously the Northeastern section of the Younger Chemists Committee. GSS really is only taking a lot of the work that they've done in setting that. But I want to take a final moment to thank our panelists. Dr. Lauren, thank you for being with us. We are so incredibly grateful to have you here. Dr. Sawyer, thank you for your time. Lee Sol, thank you for being here with us. And finally, Manny, thank you for your time. I will most certainly be connecting with all you guys, and I want to thank you for allowing me to moderate this conversation. I'll pass it back to Zemin, and thank you for everyone for attending and for those that will be tuning in later.
Thank you so much, Danny, and thank you so much, panelist speakers, for sharing your experiences with all of us. It's been an honor for me to just listening in and taking notes, and it's very incredible. Yeah, so I guess that was it for today. And I guess I will put my Twitter handle also in the chat so you can connect with me. I know I already linked with some of this panelist speakers, but yeah, I would be happy to connect with the rest as well. So please stay safe and stay healthy, and have a nice Friday evening. Bye.
Bye. Take care, everyone.